This month's four-way collaboration project is a slip-fit box suggested by Richard Raffin. In this video, I'm going to show you how I turn a slip-fit box, but I want you to check out the videos of the other three members of the team, Richard Raffin, Tomislav Tomasec, and Sam Angelo. Links to their video on this project will be in the description area. You'll see a lot of the commonality in the way we do it, but you'll also see some differences. When you see a difference in technique or a new idea, give it a try, see what works best for you. One thing that all turners that use conventional tools agree on is the tool needs to be sharp, you need to support the bevel as you cut, and you need to cut with a grain. After that, we all have our personal preferences in terms of the kind of projects we want to do, our tool choices, and particular techniques.
So I'm starting with this cherry burl blank marking centers. I like to use a spring punch because to me it's faster and easier than using an awl or other method. And we do it on both sides and put it in. I like to use a steb center for most of these kind of tasks, and a live center I like to have the one with the ring and a point, keep it from doing too much damage, and it grasps real well. So I make sure it clears the tool rest, and then I start spindle roughing gouge, going back and forth off the edge. I don't want to come back over the edge. I want to pick up a splinter or a crack. And if it spins on me, I just tighten it up, tailstock up a little bit. There's a little different view. Again, tightening up the tailstock. And I turn the screw up a little bit. And I put my hands up to deflect negotiating. Taking a fine, slow feed rate to get the smoothest cut I can. Not quite as fine as a skew, but it'll come pretty close. I use a slow feed rate down. I have a very sharp spindle gouge. So I'm marking the edge of where the top's going to be. And then I use my beating and parting tool to put a tenon on each end. I gauge how deep it goes from the location of my live center, the diameter of it. And I do it on both sides. It's a shop made tool, very handy 8mm high-speed steel. A little smaller than the typical 3/8 commercial model. So now I'm going to mount it. I mount it either end. You can go in first since you're just roughing it, but in this case I've got the top mounted at first, and then I clean off the bottom. This is very important to remove any damage and to slightly concave it. We'll show it why that's important in just a moment. Then I turn around and I do the other side. Face it off, clean off, slightly concave it, cave it in, get rid of any damage. But I might need every bit of that in the final box. Okay, now that I've got it cleaned up, I'm going to remove. I'm going to use 1/8 inch parting tool to remove the top. I've left a little extra margin there at the bottom to accommodate the tenon. I've cut out some footage. We'll see more about hollowing later, but I hollow the base, clean it up a little bit, try to get the wall appropriate, close to the final thickness, and then I put in the lid. Do the same thing with the lid. Hollow it out. First thing I do after tightening the lid, though, in this case I want the lid to be about 85% of the diameter of the widest part of the box. I take it down just a little bit. So I'll get a close reading to what the final box might look like before I true it up. Leave a small dimple. I don't normally use a depth hole for the lid. I'll just come in there, and this is the standard technique I use for hollowing, using the spindle gouge. Facing somewhere around 10 a.m. And I come back and use a scraper to kind of clean up the walls a little bit. I leave the walls near the opening fairly thick to accommodate the final box design, and I measure the depth, make sure I'm getting it deep enough. And now you can see why I concave it, so the two ends will match together with the opening ends to the outside, and I quickly wrap with a piece of tape. Here's a different design, just to show you. You're going to rough it out to roughly the way your final design is going to look. Here's a different one. So here's the blank 2 weeks later. It's in my air-conditioned shop, so it would have dried. So I remove the tape, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the lid into the chuck. Then we're going to, I checked the base against it. I've changed my design a little bit. I want to model it after this particular box, like this. The lid's not going to be smaller than the top like I originally thought. So I take a box scraper and I make the inside walls parallel very carefully. This is a conventional scraper, so the handle is raised higher than the cutting edge. And then I slide concave on the rim so it'll sit flat seat even with some slight wood movement. Now I'm going to make a little bead around the rim, so I take a point tool and mark that bead. Then I'm going to take a 3/8 inch spindle gouge and just kind of round over and shape the bead. Then I'm going to shape the lid a little bit, slightly down from the top, and slightly undercut the bead with a very shallow cut. Just get under it for a nice shadow line. Here's another view coming in from the other direction. Again, notice how I'm supporting the tool with my arm over it. Then I do a little cleanup with negative rake scraper on the inside. Get it more to the final shape. Now I use a 6-inch ruler to kind of verify that the walls are parallel. And then I measure the depth, transfer the inside to the outside. I'm going to sand now, sand on the inside. I'm using a little sanding lubricant, a little mineral oil and beeswax. Now be very careful because there's some bark inclusions here. It tends to jerk it a little bit, as you'll notice. And I go through the various grits, sanding up to about 320. And then after I get it sanded, I'm going to use some abrasive, shop-made abrasive paste shown here. And that in effect doubles the last grit. So if I finished at 320, this will take it up to equivalent of 640, getting rid of the very small, tiny scratches, and leaves the inside very polished with a light coat of wax. So I get the inside and the outside. I'd normally texture the inside, but because of that bark inclusion, I don't want to do anything to it. So I remove the lid. Now I'm going to chuck the base. Then I take the lid. Well, before I get to that, here's two tools I could use. I could use a skew or a beading and parting tool, which is very similar. So I'd rely on this beading and parting tool quite a bit. So I'm taking this down to be the tenon for the base. And then I size it. It's approximately 5/16 of an inch long. And I'll take my time, make several cuts. I don't remember how many tries it took, but it took several. And I want a really snug fit right now because I'm going to put the lid on it. You can see it was originally roughed out on the 2nd of September. And just for a little margin of safety, I'm going to tape this on the jam fit. But you want a really tight fit initially because you're going to use the base as a jam chuck as you finish off the top of the lid. So now I clean the lid off. And I'm using my 3/8 inch spindle gouge very carefully, taking a nice slicing cut. And then I leave just a little bit of a kind of a button in the middle, a little bit proud of the rest of the top. It's kind of an additional decorative feature. Slow the feed rate down to ensure a very nice cut. I think the bar conclusion will add a little interest to it. Now I'm going to sand the top. But before I do that, I'm going to use a skew to make a nice clean line at the base of that little button to give it a little bit of a shadow line. And then I'll come back in there and sand it to starting with 120 up to ending at 320. And I'm using again some shop-made sanding lubricant. It keeps it cooler, but it also keeps the fine dust down, makes it a little bit safer. Now I'm going to use that abrasive paste again. I put it on with the lathe not running, get a nice even coat on there before I get the speed up. Then I start off slow and then gradually increase the speed up to a little bit more than 1,000 to get that nice polish shine on this cherry burl. Now I can go ahead and take the lid off. And now I'm going to have to shape the base. I'm going to bring the top of the base down so it'll be just below the bead because I want the bead to be proud. So I measure the inside and see how much more I need to hollow out a little bit. I want it a little bit deeper. I mark where the inside is, transfer the inside to the outside. As it turns out, I want it a little bit deeper than this, so I'm going to subscribe another line a little bit later, but this is where I'm starting. I'm using a box scraper to just kind of take that 10-inch thickness down a little bit. And I use my finger to kind of gauge the thickness. Now I'm going to use this nickel scraper to undercut the bottom underneath the box. Just thin the walls down as well. Then I use my digital calipers, check the thickness. Sometimes I have a tendency to leave the walls a little too thick, so I'm going to be careful. Now I'm using a conventional scraper to finish thinning it out a little bit. And this one I'll actually make it just a little bit deeper than it was. Very carefully, I round the bottom. I don't like a flat bottom on boxes. I feel like it's a little easier to reach in and get something out of it if the bottom is rounded. It's a little easier to sand and a little easier to hollow. So this large 1-inch conventional scraper does the job quickly. Now I measure, adjust it again, and you can see I've gone a little bit deeper. Now I'm going to use a smaller scraper to get in there. I'm sorry, same scraper. Just continue to get underneath the rim. Back and forth slowly. Trying to feel for any unevenness. Clean it up and blend it. So now I'm going to switch to a smaller scraper, Dale Miss style scraper. This is a shop made one from a refurbished Harbor Freight tool. It's a little bit smaller, so it's a little easier to get underneath this rim. Now I'm going to put a parting cut. I don't go very deep. At the very bottom, what I feel like will be the base of the box. And this gives me something that I can start hollowing down to and gives my eye something to help guide me. Now I'm checking the thickness again near the rim to see if I need to bring it down, because again I want it to be a little bit lower than the bead. Again, using my 3/8 inch spindle gouge, I'm just taking it down a little bit and start that rounding process at the bottom. Nice shearing cuts, starting that curve. I'm probably cutting this at probably about 1600 RPM. Going right into that parting cut. Checking the thickness again of the rim underneath that bead. You take it down a little bit more. I'm using my bead and parting tool for that. I could have used a skew, but this works well for me. Up near the top. Again, use my digital calipers just to double check. Since I take it out down on the outside, it's certainly thinning the walls a little bit. Again, this cuts very much like a skew. Now I switch to back to my 3/8 inch workhorse spindle gouge as I bring that curve down near the base. And now I can part it down a little bit deeper. I don't leave as much strength at the bottom near the base until I've got the inside pretty much refined. Take it down a little bit more. Continue that curve around. Cherry burl's pretty wood, but also it smells nice too. Now I start the sanding process, starting at about 150, jumping up to 240. You can see the shininess comes from that sanding lubricant. And after I've gone through the grits, again I'm putting that abrasive paste on the outside, which really makes it shine. This is not going to be my final finish, but it certainly makes it nice and smooth in preparation for the final finish. Checking the fit. I'll have to relieve it just a little bit because I made it really tight. Now I'm going to just reduce some of the excess wood at the bottom before I reverse chuck it using a jam chuck. So I switch to a smaller parting tool. And I leave a little bit of a stem. I double check one more time, make sure I've got as much off the bottom as I want at this stage. So I reach into my drawer where I keep all my scraps for jam chucks, some of them, and I'm reusing a pine one that I had that was just the appropriate size. I already had a tenon on it. So reorient, and using my box scraper again, I'm going to make a very gradual slope of about 3 degrees, about the same slope you'd have on your Morse paper. So when I jam chuck it, it's gonna start into the opening and then get very tight. And it also makes it easy to trial fit. In this case, it didn't quite make it. You can see that I've got a little bit of a gap, so I'm going to have to do it again. And it still didn't get it just right. So it took me several tries. That's all right. Rinse and repeat. Take your time, sneak up on that fit. Now I'm pounding it in, and hit it with the handle, and unfortunately I snap off the base, but because there was a stem on it, I didn't rip out any little shards. It didn't really go into the base, so it wasn't really a problem. I like to keep that bottom on there because it makes it a little easier to line up the live center and make sure you've got this thing really centered in the jam chuck. So now I'm going straight in with my spindle gouge to get rid of that little nubbin on the bottom. A little bit of a pull cut. Now I'm going to slowly, carefully slice in from the outside to the inside. Slightly concave, so if there's any wood movement, it'll still sit flat. Jam chucks are just a great technique. Any box maker is going to master the jam chuck. I grab whatever flat tool I can find. Well, before I get to that, I'm using a negative rake scraper to just kind of clean off the bottom here just a little bit more. Get rid of any tool marks before I do any final sanding. Make it slightly concave, up and across. Get rid of that little button in the middle. Up, down, and across. Sand it. And here's where I reach for whatever flat tool I have handy, which is this measuring device, just to make sure that it's going to set around the rim, and that I've hollered it out from the bottom just deep enough. Now I'm making a very small little circle in the middle to help me guide me as to exactly where I start my texturing tool, the spiraling tool, to put a little decoration on the bottom, because I don't want to go right into the center. I want to be off the center just a little bit. I like to add this little detail to boxes. You'll get a better view here in just a moment. And of course, anytime you texture, you've got to frame it just like a picture frame. So I'm going to come in with my point tool outside the texturing on the inside and the outside. Make a double bead on the outside. And here's the light. You can see it a little bit better. Now, it's time to remove it. There's several ways. Air hose might work if I'd taken this thing off, but certainly going down to the headstock's not going to remove it. I want to show you a technique that I tend to use. I remove any excess with a parting tool, and then I come in and part, giving myself a little bit of wood, maybe an eighth of an inch or so, 16th of an inch or an eighth of an inch between the parting tool and the box. And you got to be careful that you don't go too deep, that you don't cut into the tenon. And then I can wedge it off without damaging the wood, and this tends to work very well. The other technique, because this had a hole in it, I could also use a stick and come through, and smacked it with a mallet, or done that off the lathe. But that other approach works well for me. So here's the final box. I like the looks of it. Okay, let's test for that suction fit. Snaps on, pops off. Snaps on, pops off. I might have to relieve this just a bit with some very fine sandpaper, but I think I'll wait a few days and let it fully dry and see about it then. I love turning boxes. You know, somebody called boxes the high art of wood turning, because you can do so many things. You can make them functional, like this box I made for my daughter-in-law, this jewelry box, or these pill boxes, or you can make them fun, whimsical, or kind of arty, like this 10-inch across lock box. I hope you'll take the opportunity to click on the links below to my four-way partners, Richard Raffin, Thomas Love, Thomas Etch, and Sam Angelo. We all have our different style and different way of doing it, and I think there's something to be learned from all of them. I've got a complete playlist on box making. If you're interested, click on that link above. Remember, y'all stay safe. Come on back, you hear?